My love for JRPGs started with a game called Phantasy Star Portable, which was released in 2009 for the Sony PSP. It's the very first JRPG I've ever played, and it blew my mind with what was possible with the genre. It stands as an underrated classic and is still worth checking out today if you're a fan of sci-fi fantasy games. It's somewhat similar to Monster Hunter games in a way, however I massively prefer the heavy focus on story and characters that this game has. I found the special trial version of this game on the PSP's PlayStation Store, which allowed you to play the first mission and get a general feel for it, and I decided to give it a shot and I was instantly blown away with it. As someone who spent a lot of my childhood playing mainly racing games and platformers, the idea of being able to have a character and the ability to customize their setup and look was just unheard of for me. Little did I know that at the time that I started playing was that I'd end up with over 100 hours of playtime in this game, and that it'd end up sitting in my top 6 favorite games of all time. Phantasy Star Portable shined on the PSP with visuals that weren't as good as its console counterparts, I'll admit, but certain aspects actually ended up working in the game's favor. Thankfully, it still had the same charm thanks to its identical gameplay elements and world. And speaking of worlds, the story takes place in the Graal system, a star system with 3 planets and a man-made colony. In this system are 4 main races, with each having their own habitat. The Guardian's colony serves as your home base for your character, and it's where your room is located and where you start out in this story. There's also Param, a futuristic society ruled by a race called castes, which are basically robots for lack of a better word, who are advanced life forms with some even being able to show emotion. Of course, with them being so futuristic, many castes believe that they're the superior race and look down upon other races. They are able to communicate with a satellite to summon large weapons called SUV or sub-weapons to do damage to enemies around them in combat. There's also New Days, which is home to the Newman race who specialize in casting spells, or as the game calls it, techniques. They're also generally smarter than any other race, even though physically they are the weakest. New Days is also led by the Communion of Graal, making them a theocracy, and it's also my personal favorite. And finally, there's Motub, which is a rough planet with harsh conditions leading to its inhabitants, the Beasts, being more physically tough than the other races. They're also able to transform into a massive creature and become much more powerful during combat, which is a mechanic called nanoblasting. All of these details give the game some pretty good world building. Of course, with Portable, you're only getting a piece of the larger world of Phantasy Star Universe, but even still, Graal has a nice sense of place. The story was solid as well, with new characters at the forefront and a plot that bridged the events of both Phantasy Star Universe and its sequel expansion Ambition of the Illuminus, none of which were released on a PSP. This game has you create your own avatar where you can change their look to suit your style, and while your options are pretty limited the first time, once you go to customize your look later on, you'll find that there's a good amount of things you can do to further make your character more unique. This is different from Phantasy Star Universe, which had its own protagonist, the extremely likable, Ethan Weber.
Are you two alright?
Thank you, mister. You rescued us.
Yeah, thanks for getting in the way.
What?
Ethan, how could you say that? We could have been in real trouble.
I could have handled those guys just fine by myself.
Oh, sounds like you're quite the tough guy.
Wanna find out?
Ethan, stop being so stupid.
You can also set your character's class, which can determine your abilities in combat. For starters, there's Hunter, which focuses on melee damage, there's Ranger, which focuses on ranged weapons like guns, and Enforce, which focuses on magic, or once again, techniques. These are your starting options, and at this point you're allowed to equip some pretty okay weapons, but as you level up your class, you'll unlock more advanced classes which allow you to equip stronger weapons. Moving on to the story, it starts with your character as you complete your basic training and are now a bona fide guardian. You are partnered up with Vivian, a female caste who was just born a few days ago, and because of that she lacks a lot of life experience and is very naive. You spend most of your time with her, and throughout the story she'll develop based on what you say to her and around her. Sometimes at random points in the story, you'll be given choices while speaking to multiple different characters, and Vivian is always paying attention to how you respond to certain situations and will often put you to the side to inquire about random things, such as what would it be like to have been born a baby, or why your character is always so quiet, which is especially funny because you are a silent protagonist in this game.
Welcome back. Our last mission was really something, wasn't it? I think I've become quite adjusted to combat. Although it would be nice if it were easier to win all of the time. What are you grinning at? I just thought it would be nice if we could talk a little. You hardly ever say anything. Is there a specific reason you refuse to communicate? I see.
Moments like these help to flesh out her character, and I do enjoy how I can just be minding my own business and just run into a character to see how they're doing. These little moments of idle chat, whether between you and Vivian or even other characters, really does a lot when it comes to making these characters likable. And being honest with you, Vivian is my favorite character in all of Phantasy Star because of moments like this. She's also just a great character that goes from naive and curious at the beginning to courageous at the end. The antagonist of the game is Helga Newman, who at the beginning is supposedly involved with terrorism around Gural, and the story basically revolves around pursuing her. I won't spoil the twist regarding her character and Vivian, but these games deal with the Sea Threat, which is an alien life form that threatened the Gural system in the previous Phantasy Star universe. And this game is no exception. Overall, I felt that the story was really good despite it not being super long. It's not a masterpiece by any means, but I've known these characters for so long that I can't help but love them. Moving on to the menus, or the facilities, they're all menu based thanks to the PSP hardware. When you travel between planets, you're greeted with a nice wallpaper and a simplistic menu. Now, considering I started with this game and not something like Phantasy Star Universe, anything outside of combat was just still backgrounds that you could move a cursor around, or menus that you could navigate. I had no clue that you could actually explore the colony and the planets in the console games, and it was kind of a mind blow from my younger self. Yet with that being said, I still didn't mind this system. It definitely made moving around a lot quicker. I guess it comes down to personal preference. Overall, I prefer the 3D environments, but the static images do have their pluses. Most of the quote cutscenes were the same way, with you advancing text while portraits of the characters appeared when they spoke, but that kind of gave the game a nice visual novel flair and really helped with the funny moments that wouldn't really work in an actual animated cutscene. There were FMVs in the game, but they were few and far between, usually only used for the intro segment and important story points. Moving on to combat, which is one of the biggest aspects of the game, and if you play it, you'll be doing a lot of it. So unfortunately, this is the part of the game that didn't really age all that well. While I still enjoy it, I gotta admit that it can be a little slow at times. There are a lot of different weapon types like sabers, longswords, daggers, and even types of guns, but there's a certain sluggishness to the combat that I don't think holds up as well today, in my opinion. You can do basic attacks or special attacks called photon arts that use up photon points, and each weapon type has a good amount of unique skills. You can also set your weapons to a palette in order to quickly swap between them, which ended up becoming a thing that all modern Phantasy Star games did. When you play with your friends, the combat is much more fun, mainly because of all the different roles that players can adapt. You can focus on healing and buffing the party, head-on combat, or ranged combat. However, when you're playing alone, even with AI partners, it still feels like you're doing all of the work, and that's because your partners aren't really that helpful and spend more time dead than alive. Occasionally they'll throw out an attack or heal you, but for the most part, if you're not doing damage, nothing is gonna happen. I kinda get it, maybe AI wasn't the best at the time, and this game is running on the same engine as PSU, which was released for the PS2, so maybe there was only so much they can do in terms of that, but overall the combat still felt stale and outdated. This is made even more apparent with Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis, which has a completely overhauled weapons and combat system, and just feels like a modern action game. Back then I was able to really enjoy it, but nowadays I find it a little hard to grind out. It's a little too dated for my taste if I'm being honest here. The music in this game is really good though, luckily. Phantasy Star games have some of the best music in the history of JRPGs, and luckily this game features tracks from both PSU and PSO. Most of them sound absolutely amazing, however, being a portable system there had to be some cutbacks. Some tracks were simplified for the PSP release, probably to save space. This mainly applies to the field themes, and while they still sound good, it's kind of insane how modified these tracks were. However, even with this compression, if you can call it that, the music is still great. So overall, I still love Phantasy Star Portable. I owe so much to this game for bringing me into the world of JRPGs, and I think I would have had completely different gaming tastes if it weren't for this one game here. From the outside, the game honestly might not look that special, but this is seriously one of the best JRPGs I've ever played in my life. Even now in 2022, I'm still a massive fan of Phantasy Star, and I'm glad that the series is still relevant today, even if it's not in my favorite form, with it being an MMO. I'll take that over nothing though. But anyway, that's all I have to say for Phantasy Star Portable. Is there a game out there for you guys that made you a fan of a specific genre like me? If so, let me know down below in the comments. I'll be reading those. And as always, if you like this video, leave a like. If not, leave a dislike. And if you want to see more videos from my channel talking about a plethora of games from both PlayStation and Nintendo consoles, hit that subscribe button. Thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next video.